started, and I want to say again, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining today. This is the Leadership Academy Communities of Practice. So we're excited to have everyone be with us. First thing on our agenda, we usually do a round robin from each state, see who's on. So we'll open it up now and start with California. If you would like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, so we'll know, please do that now. California, is anyone on from California?
Good morning, this is Cynthia from the Bakersfield office in California.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Anyone else? Moving on to Illinois, anyone on from Illinois?
Hi, this is Pam Gaddis. Good afternoon. Pam Gaddis from Illinois Division of Rehab, Illinois.
Okay, Pam, it's good to have you.
Good to see you.
Anyone else? All right, next up is Kentucky.
Walla Hammonds from Kentucky.
Walla, good to see you.
You too.
Next up is Louisiana.
Sue Hayes from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, LRS, Louisiana Rehab Services. I'm a rehabilitation counselor, transitional counselor, and liaison counselor for HOT.
Good to have you, Sue. Anyone else?
Megan Coleman-Watkin from Crescent Care, New Orleans.
Megan.
Brian Turner. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, professor at Xavier, but I'm a mental health consultant working with Southern University of Baton Rouge.
Good to have you, Brian. Next up is Montana.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Susan. I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, that's okay. I'm just letting you all know I'm here. I think Dr. Kundu is also here. He might have stepped out of the room though.
Yeah, Karen is here from
Hi,
Southern
Karen.
University Program Manager for Project E3.
Yay, Karen.
Hey.
Montana. Next up is New Hampshire. All right.
Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. Are you from New Hampshire?
I've been working at home, so you just can't see me right now, but I will listen. Debbie.
Debbie, good to
Debbie
have you.
Pearson, Louisiana Rehab.
Great.
Right
Thanks
there.
for being on.
Hey,
Next is New Jersey.
This is Elaine Katz from Kessler Foundation, New Jersey, one of the hot spots in the coronavirus. Woo!
Woo! Yay, New Jersey. Hopefully you're on the downward spiral like Sue said is for Louisiana. Anyone else on from New Jersey? What about New Mexico? All right, we have North Carolina.
Beth Newcomb's here from North Carolina.
Hello.
Hi.
Good to have you. Anyone else? We have Oregon.
Well, Christina Bard. I'm actually Kentucky and Oregon, but I missed the K's, so I'm here.
Good to have you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Ballinger, Youth Business Relations Coordinator with the Oregon Commission for the Blind. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Matt. Glad you're on. South Carolina is next.
Oh, I'm here. This is Kelly Jockum. I'm a Regional Director with the South Carolina Commission for the Blind.
Hey, Kelly. Anyone else from South Carolina? We have Virginia next.
Hi, Sharmel Motley, and I'm a VR counselor with Virginia DARS. It's my first time on.
Welcome. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks for
And I'm
having me.
Deidre Pentecost with Virginia
hey,
DARS
Deidre.
as well. Hey, Sharmel.
Glad to have you both.
Thank you.
Anyone that we missed from the States? What about our partners?
Kyle Walker from the University of Wisconsin Stout Vocational Rehabilitation Institute.
Hello.
Go Badgers.
Robin, good afternoon. This is Tony Perry with Kentucky Vocational Rehabilitation. I must have missed the earlier roll call. My apologies.
No problem. Thanks for being on today. Anyone else on that we missed or missed the roll call earlier that want to introduce themselves? Well, again, thank you all for being with us today. We have a great presentation lined up for you, great program and discussion. We're first going to hear from Matthew Ballinger, who is the Youth Business Relations Coordinator with Oregon Commission for the Blind. And he was so gracious enough to put together some information for us on how they're using virtual meeting technology to enhance their pre-ETS program. So we appreciate you, Matt, for joining us, and thank Jane Hagel, who referred us to you, and I know she couldn't be on today. So Matt, we'll turn it over to you. You can share your screen, or if you have a PowerPoint, we'll turn it over to you and you can do that now.
Okay, yeah, let me. All right, is that showing up for you all?
Not yet. There we go.
All right. So yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Matt Ballinger. I am the Youth Business Relations Coordinator for the Oregon Commission for the Blind. I am also a VRC within our agency. We have 3 business relations coordinators who are CRCs, but don't carry a caseload, instead kind of work on the kind of business-facing end. And my role is even more specific than that. I work specifically with kind of engaging with youth and youth programming across the state of Oregon. So I'm based out of Portland, but my role yeah, I just was invited to come today and talk a little bit about some of the things that we are doing at the Oregon Commission for the Blind to kind of navigate these times and keep clients engaged. So first of all, kind of breaking it in my mind into 2 kind of separate categories. I have sort of the continuation of some of our existing programs, so things that we were either already online or that we were pivoting to more of a virtual format. As we're all working from home, and client engagement in some ways has kind of fallen back. Certainly on my end, a lot of business engagement has fallen back because businesses are just closed. We have a little bit of more time to kind of think through some of our processes, and hopefully in ways that will last beyond kind of getting back, post kind of COVID-19, kind of really figuring out ways to make our systems more accessible, our programs more accessible. So yeah, we already did have some kind of virtual elements so that we could, serve our statewide clientele. We have our main training center is in Portland, which is where our headquarters is, but it's all the way up in the corner of the state. It's a long ways away from a lot of our clients. We do have 4 other field offices that serve those areas, but in some of the less densely populated parts of the state, kind of the eastern half of the state, we have 1 counselor serving that whole area. So really kind of getting that regular engagement is really challenging. So looking at some of our existing programs, a couple of the members on my team, on the business engagement team, held a job development and networking group. So again, at our training center, we kind of function on a 10-week quarters that are, fall, spring, winter, and summer. And for each of those, they do this job development networking group. That is all done virtually. So there is a 10-week curriculum covering kind of all aspects of the job search process. It is more aimed at adults who are kind of ready to get to a job. So the kind of ultimate goal of that 10-week class is that you are applying to jobs and hopefully are getting some interviews. But it covers everything from, doing resumes, creating your elevator pitch, interviewing skills, disability disclosure, kind of how to access labor market using kind of our Department of Employment and the workforce system and those kind of public resources. And so that group is something that kind of already existed and was a good model for us kind of moving forward. That group meets via a Zoom platform once a week during that time. And then there are also kind of homework assignments that the students might use to kind of, that they can be working on in between. And those are going to be directly related to kind of whatever the competency is for that week. And then kind of flipping over to some of our things that we're currently existing and we're having to sort of pivot. For example, our orientation and mobility instructors that are typically out kind of in the community doing cane training, doing public transit training, all of that stuff, have really had to rethink their processes. So really they're focusing more on that orientation piece, not so much the mobility piece. So they are trying to figure out some options for that right now also. So they're really having kind of phone meetings with clients, looking at kind of exploring wayfinding apps such as Blind Square, how to access public transportation or like route planning. So using Google Maps, using our kind of local public transit platforms, and really getting very familiar with using those, especially for screen readers, screen reader users for whom that can be a bit more challenging. Our computer and assistive technology folks have had, some of their classes are pretty easy to kind of flip to a virtual format, doing things like keyboarding lessons, or if, we have our folks that specialize in kind of like handheld devices, so doing iPhone lessons with specific apps, whether, there's obviously a variety of apps kind of that can make the world independent living and the workplace just a lot more accessible for folks with vision loss. So those things are relatively easy to do. And kind of thinking through, often using kind of like JAWS Tandem that allows instructors, many of our tech instructors are themselves screen reader users. And so being able to allow them to kind of work in tandem with the students that they're serving. And then we also are continuing with Braille lessons, which can largely be done virtually. If students have a Braille display, we can just email them the curriculum. If not, we are embossing Braille and mailing it out to people and doing kind of over the phone meetings. So those are some of the things that we were kind of already doing, and we're kind of looking at ways to make those accessible. Our orientation mobility instructors are looking at ways of also using vests with cameras to do some limited mobility instruction. Obviously, safety is the primary concern doing mobility instruction, not in person, since you have folks kind of out in crossing busy intersections and things like that. So doing that in a very careful and kind of thought out way. So two new programs, which are the ones that I think that I had spoken with Robin about, and two that we've kind of implemented since, are these peer mentor groups and a virtual job club. The peer mentor group actually originally started at the beginning of the year, just before kind of everything went on lockdown. And the idea behind this is it really, first of all, it's aligned directly with that kind of pre-S service of workplace readiness and self-advocacy. So living well with a disability, social skills, kind of being able to talk through maybe challenges, whether it's, the students that are typically coming to this group are in their last couple of years of high school or their first couple of years of college. And so whether that's, right now, there's been so much discussion around access to virtual learning platforms. A lot of people that are realizing that their schools weren't in a place to kind of offer distance learning, and especially weren't in a place to offer distance learning to folks with visual impairments. And so they're really scrambling to get access to kind of what they need. So what the peer mentor group is kind of designed to do is just give students a confidential space to come through and talk through those things. So that is, currently we do 2 of those a month. One of them is a statewide group, and one of them is open specifically to kind of Portland metro area students where we have a higher density. And that group, again, it started off as a way to kind of provide services. One of our big goals right now is to really kind of increase our services to students in rural areas because they're the ones that really tend to kind of get left out of those conversations. We have, in-person groups that meet, transition-specific groups that meet once a month at our training center, but those are not groups that can be attended by, students in the rest of the state. So it's really thinking through how to do that. And this was one kind of thing that we landed on. It does meet via Zoom. Also, we've experimented with doing conference calls as well. Right now, Zoom seems to be kind of the best way that is working. Also, it allows students to kind of build that skill. So for students who are, especially like screen reader users, kind of building that ability to kind of use Zoom, which has kind of become such a part of everyone's life all of a sudden. And we've really seen a lot of response. Our counselors all over the state were really saying that was one of the primary needs. They had students that were isolated and students that were kind of just not building that self-confidence. So allowing them to connect with other students with vision loss and talk through just kind of whatever's going on in their life. Sometimes it is things like accessibility. Sometimes it's just things like relationships or, friendships or, any number of things. But allowing them to do that in a space where kind of their vision loss doesn't have to be explained is really powerful. And then the virtual job club is the other one that we are doing. So that's very similar to that JDN, just a typo there, similar to the JDN, but it's focused on transition aged youth. So what we found were I'm sorry? Was there a question?
No, not right now. Go ahead.
Okay. If there are any questions, yeah, please just let me know and I'll happy to answer. So this one's focused on transition age youth. What we were finding with the JDN group was, first of all, that our high school and college age students weren't able to attend a once weekly class. It was a barrier. Maybe a few would, but there were a lot that just weren't able to do it, especially if they're in high school and it was something that was happening during the day. And also just the frequency of it was just largely a barrier for students. Beyond that, it was really designed to kind of lead to a job. We have a lot of students who could benefit from a bulk of kind of what was being presented and kind of worked on in that group, but they weren't ready to look for work, or at least not in the same way. So it was more about kind of doing job exploration and building those kind of basic skills. So doing some networking, kind of teaching them what an informational interview is and really let them lead that process. A lot of the kind of research that we're seeing is that things like summer work experiences and student interview or info interviews are really helpful, but they're especially helpful when they are student-led, when the students are actually taking the initiative to kind of go out and do that. That really builds that sense of confidence and that self-efficacy piece, that this isn't just something that my VR counselor is like kind of setting up for me and I'm getting some great information. That's fantastic. But when the student is actually able to go and do that themselves, they don't need the counselor there kind of walking them through that process anymore. They know how to do it. They can walk the walk and it becomes so much more effective. Again, that group does meet once per month. And that is currently kind of conceived as a 3-class course. So it meets once a month for 3 months for an hour and a half at a time. And then again, based on kind of whatever the curriculum is for that meeting, there will be a number of homework assignments that student is to kind of go and do. And then there's also opportunities for one-on-one counseling. So that's leading through things like we have our career information system in Oregon that's sort of like a TCI Plus or ONET, but kind of focused specifically on Oregon labor information. And also it has the ability to change the language a little bit more suited for transition age students. The information is a little bit pared down, it's a little bit more accessible, and you can actually adjust the actual language of it to be kind of suitable for a high school student or a middle school student. That's also super helpful in the case where you're working with someone maybe with some kind of a cognitive impairment or something like that. We're kind of looking at all of the kind of technical information on something like ONET is just it's gonna be white noise for them. So it really just allows us to kind of provide information that's accessible and actually useful to them. We have our Living with Blindness course also, and this is something that we just recently transitioned. So this is, again, typically a 10-week course that's offered in person. And it's just part of our kind of regular curriculum. and it's usually offered to kind of students who are just coming to the Commission for the Blind. And this is really a structured course that is designed to help people kind of talk through issues specifically related to adjustment to their disability. It's a course that we have so much faith in. We really believe in this course. We've seen just a whole lot of benefit for students that have participated in it. But again, wasn't available to youth and wasn't available to students who weren't able to come to our training center. We do have a limited amount of housing that we can put people in while they're training, so if they're coming from other parts of the state, but it is limited, and you know, coming to Portland for 10 weeks just isn't necessarily isn't doable for a lot of people. So we've transitioned that to a Zoom-based course also. And what we found is that increased accessibility led to an increase in the availability for people to participate in the class. So we went from having just one class per term. We're now doing 3 classes. So we have one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and one on Friday, with different cohorts that are kind of moving through that class together. And this is one thing that we're really excited about, kind of extending past kind of COVID-19, because it's just one of those things that, like, we kind of had our way of doing things that kind of got upended, and now we're rethinking our processes and thinking, you know, that this can be so much more beneficial to a broader group of people. You know, you do miss out on a little bit of the, I think, depth when you're not talking in person. But so far this term with our online courses, we've just seen a lot of connection and a lot of benefit that I wouldn't have necessarily thought possible in a Zoom meeting. So it's been really fantastic. And then, you know, finally, our summer work experience program. This is our big kind of flagship youth program. We have 2 residential programs. One's here in Portland and one is in Salem. And so the Salem course is kind of our more foundational course, and then students can go to Portland. So they're a 5 or 6 week work experience program where they're living typically in the dorms and working in the community for that time. And there's a whole litany of other activities that are built into that. So social activities, independent living activities. We do an Iron Chef competition, just a whole bunch of stuff. This year, we, following kind of governor's guidance, had to pivot that again to an all virtual format. And then we're really thinking, like, well, what does SWEP look like if it doesn't have work experiences, if it doesn't have that communal kind of living, social, independent living aspects to it. And this is one where we're still kind of early in the planning processes, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit just to kind of show where we are. It's like very dynamic and happening right now. We're partnering with the General VR agency, they patterned a summer program kind of off of ours. And we do a lot of kind of coordinated activities with them. So we're really kind of moving forward, thinking about what's that going to look like. So in some of the plans that we're looking through, we have a college boot camp that we're talking about doing, where we're kind of going through a lot of the kind of basic competencies that a student with vision loss really needs to be successful, whether that's tech skills, self-advocacy skills, knowing what their resources are, being able to plan ahead to get accessible materials, that kind of thing. Also a 5-week student-led job search. So similar to kind of that kind of JDN group, but this is actually going to be like a complete job search. So they're going to do the resume, the informational interviews, the elevator pitches, that whole piece. And then we're working with the Department of Labor to get an actual mock job posting posted on the state site. So we'll have, you know, that's limited access. So they're actually going to go onto a real job board, be able to find this job posting, apply to it, and then we'll have people doing, you know, mock interviews, and then, you know, that'll wrap in disability disclosure, this whole thing. So it's really going to be this, you know, hopefully pretty robust kind of job search experience. Also, all of the regular kind of individual and group counseling as part of our SWEP. We're doing virtual meal prep classes where we are going to have our meal prep instructor teaching virtually and kind of having deliveries of food come to the students. So we'll actually have boxes of food, of ingredients that will show up to the student. We're going to be sending out things like cutting gloves, talking thermometers, all of those kinds of things that our students use, and do virtual cooking classes, meal prep classes, so they can be independent in preparing their own food. And, you know, just a lot more. We're still, this was, you know, a decision that just came about a couple of weeks ago. And so we're still very much kind of in the planning processes. But those are just some of the things that we're thinking about doing as part of this that we are currently planning to do. And that's kind of what I have for you. I don't know if there are any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Matt. That's great information. Questions for Matt?
Hey, Matt, it's John Walsh. First of all, really good presentation. It's really encouraging to see how there's so much creativity put into creating spaces for folks and services for folks that are essentially, they have to be home. And really pivoting in a way. And I like the way you talked about pivoting and experimenting. Let's try different things. Let's see what works and what doesn't work. So I think that's really commendable. The other piece I wanted to say is I love the way also, because of the challenge of COVID-19, you've also identified an opportunity to deliver services in the future in a virtual format. Not that it's going to replace face-to-face, but you had mentioned that you actually are providing more courses now than you did before. So potentially reaching more folks. So that's my comment. I do have a question. So one of the items we're concerned about when we go to a digital footprint is we know in this country there's still a digital divide. And there's still some folks that do not have broadband or have access to computer equipment. Has any of that been a challenge in Oregon?
It has to some degree. We've certainly saw our, first of all, our equipment expenditures over the last month as we're trying to get equipment out. But in our rural areas, for sure, there are folks that don't necessarily. So yeah,
It's breaking up.
Okay, thank you. There have been some issues where, some kind of workarounds that we have seen for that are, Zoom does offer, being able to just call into a meeting, so that doesn't necessarily rely, that doesn't rely on broadband. If they just have a landline, they can call in. Getting information, if they don't have the ability to open like large files on the internet, we can maybe load stuff on thumb drives. So if there are digital resources that we need to get to students, we can load that stuff on thumb drives and physically mail it to them. And then they have, all of the electronic files that they might need. Those are kind of, I think, a couple of the big workarounds. We haven't had, honestly, huge problems, I think, just because our client density in those more rural areas is relatively small. As a blind agency, we're already serving a pretty small portion of the population. But those are I think some of the kind of workarounds that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it sounds like you're giving folks various options on how to access it. And you're right, Zoom could be accessed through a phone. It doesn't have to be accessed through a computer necessarily. And I'm sure that in itself, most folks have access to phone services, and the fact that you're also sending things to their home, the food prep, I thought that was really creative. We're going to prep this meal because, Matt, I worked for New Jersey Blind for many years, and that was always, parents were always afraid of their teenagers, prepping a meal by themselves, using a knife, and getting those high school students to get that confidence to say, yeah, I could use non-visual techniques to cook the same meal and just as good, if not better. So kudos to your agency.
Yeah, but it's really that one. Thank you. We also we have a wood shop at our agency too, but we've stopped short of sending out band saws.
Thank
but
you.
We'll see.
Other questions for Matthew before we move on?
Yeah, this is Menan Kundu. I have a question for you. In rural Oregon, what type of jobs they are employed? What kind of jobs they're employed? That's what I want to know.
It really depends. There are a variety, really, region by region, it can look a lot different. Of course, there are a lot of like manufacturing jobs. One of our actually small towns in Central Oregon has a large Facebook facility. So there are a surprising number of tech jobs in certain parts. You know, there are always going to be obviously like service industry jobs, those kinds of things, you know, retail. Yeah, I would say it just really varies community by community, but those are some of the things.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew, we appreciate you sharing great information about your work at Oregon Commission for the Blind. Thank you again.
Absolutely, yeah, and do please anyone reach out to me if there are more questions.
Absolutely, and we'll also, this presentation has already been posted on our Leadership Academy website. If you didn't receive it earlier through the calendar invite, I will send that to you at the end of this presentation today. But you can reach out to Matthew. His email is matthew.ballinger, BALLINGER, at state.or.us. Thank you again, Matthew.
Absolutely.
We are going to turn it over now to Kevin Redd, who is our IT manager with the University of Arkansas Currents. And he's going to walk us through some helpful resources on maximizing Zoom for your meetings.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna go over how to set up a Zoom meeting and how to make it secure and keep it secure, and then go over some of the host's meeting controls. So, and I definitely welcome questions at any time, because I can go over some techie information really fast. The first thing I'm going to do is start with a screen share of our Zoom account. Let me go over to, so let me bring that up. It should, oops, one more step. There we go. Okay, now we have it. You should be looking at our website now, if you, at the Zoom website of our account. And I'm just going to start through scheduling a new meeting. Once you've logged into the website, you can go over to meetings and schedule a new meeting. And you can give it a name. And there's an option for a description there. And you can set up the time that you're going to have the meeting and the duration. Let's say it's an hour. There's an option for recurring meeting. There's another option for registration. And you can do registration through Zoom if you don't have another platform. Now here's one piece, a couple of pieces I want to mention here for security. Each account, you have your own personal meeting ID, which can be reused over and over, which made things pretty easy, because people would know what your meeting ID was. You know, if you said, let's have a meeting, tell your staff, let's have a meeting at such a time, and they already knew the ID from previous meetings. But I'm sure you've seen in the news the Zoom bombing and people putting, you know, obscene, inappropriate screen shares, you know, in meetings that they shouldn't have even been involved in. So one thing I would strongly encourage you to do is to use a random meeting ID. Leave this option selected that says generate automatically. And the next thing I recommend is to require a password. And it will create a password for you automatically, or you could enter one here. And when you join a meeting, your participants can join one of two ways. They can enter the meeting ID, and then they'll be prompted for the password, or embedded in the link that you send to participants, the password will be there, so they won't have to enter it. And then video, you have the option of having video on for the host. Most likely for the host you would, that's the person, you know, hosting the meeting. But for participants, you can choose whether or not you want them to share. So if it's going to be kind of a one-way presentation where the host is going to present on a topic and you don't want them to share, you can just leave that off. But for meetings like in our situation, we do want them to share video. Then there's the audio. You can have people either call in or use their computer, use the phone or computer, or you can do both. And then here's another option, enable join before host. I would leave that one unchecked. I would, recommend for security that the host be the one to start the meeting and have it already up and running and be ready for participants. Then here's another one that sometimes if you can mute participants upon entry. This is kind of handy if you're going to be doing a presentation and don't want the start of the meeting to be interrupted. And here's a new one that I checked today, and I think I threw Robin off with this one, but it's enable the waiting room. So you can't just go right into the meeting until one of the hosts, a host or a co-host, admits you into the meeting. So if you see somebody in the waiting room that you don't recognize that you know shouldn't be there, you can just leave them in the waiting room. You don't have to let them come on into the meeting, or you can remove them from the waiting room. There's one about only authenticated users can join, and I think that has to do with registration. I haven't looked into that one too much yet. And then you can pre-assign breakout rooms. We'll see how breakout rooms work here in just a few minutes. But I took a spreadsheet. I took all the email addresses of everybody who's going to join this meeting that Robin gave to me and put them in a comma-separated values spreadsheet. And I was able to upload everybody, and the client automatically put everybody into a room. Or you can create rooms manually. You can, there we go. This allows you to create a room, give it a room name, and enter the participant's email address. And then here's another option here. You can have the meeting automatically record, so you don't have to remember to start recording the meeting.
There's a question, Kevin. Can you
yeah, please.
A custom call-in number for the meeting in Zoom? Can you create and can you enter a custom call-in number? I think those numbers are generated, aren't they?
Yes, the numbers are generated from Zoom, and it's based on the region we're in, which we're in the US, and Zoom is all over the world, but you could have numbers local for other countries. But those numbers are, I'm not sure about a custom call-in number. I think those are automatically done through Zoom. But here's our meeting is created, and you can add it to your calendar, Google Calendar, Outlook, or Yahoo Calendar. You can look at the password again here if you need to see it. And also, here's the URL for the meeting. And this portion at the end, this jumble of letters, is the encoded, encrypted meeting password. And there's also, with this meeting, I'll show here in a little bit, you have the option to create a poll for the meetings. And now going over the security settings, there's one more thing I want to check out within your Zoom account. If you click on settings, and if you come down to, oh no, that's in another portion. Let's see. Let me bring up my, I forget exactly where this portion is, but you can limit the data centers. Say Zoom has data centers in different countries, and most likely for us, we're only going to be in the US, have meetings, our participants will only be from the US. So I've limited ours meetings to people only from the US. We covered meeting passwords and the waiting room. And once a meeting is started, there's a control to lock the meeting so nobody else can join the meeting, which is very handy. So once you know all your participants are in, you can go ahead and lock it.
I have another question for you about the polling. Are you going to be talking about that a little bit later, or?
Yes, I'm going to go into the polling here just a little bit later. And then there's the remove participant. You can take a participant out of a meeting, and you can limit participants whether or not they have the permission to screen share or not. You can turn that off for everyone, or you can turn it on or off per participant, as well as chat. I don't know if you ever have meetings, if somebody's getting rude in chat, you can turn their chat privileges off if that's necessary. That's just an option.
I have a question about the
Okay.
You can also mute everyone, right? But if you're giving, if someone like Matt is presenting, how do you keep from muting the presenter?
You can, the way I would do that is I would mute everybody and then I would go to Matt and unmute Matt.
Okay.
So that's a quick way to silence everyone, and then you have only the presenter. And then the meeting encryption, this is new. They've upgraded their encryption, which I don't know if AES 256-bit GCM means anything to anybody, but it's a really strong encryption algorithm. So your meeting's encrypted and can't be hacked. The data traveling between us and the server. And now I'm going to switch over to a different document that's, if anything else, it's going to help me stay on track. These are images I've taken from the in-meeting Zoom controls, because if I try to screen share the Zoom meeting while the controls at the same time, it doesn't really work. It's kind of like the mirror and mirror effect, and you get a really weird image that nobody can understand or make sense of. But on the left side of Zoom, the controls down at the bottom, I'm sure you've seen there's the mute and the start video buttons. You can mute yourself with that button, or you can click it to take the red slash out of it to unmute yourself, and you can start and stop your video in the same way. And if you'll click the up arrow to the right of the mute button, we get this menu here where we can select the microphone. I had a issue the other day where I've got two microphones on my computer. One's here on the headset, and then one's built into the computer. And I wanted my headset microphone to work, which is much better. So I could switch microphones here between either the one on the webcam or the one on my headset. And the same with the speakers, either to my headphones or the one on the laptop. There's the same thing with video options. I've got like a lot of people probably have a webcam built into their laptop, or I've got this external microphone webcam that I'm using, the Logitech C920, which provides a much better image. And if you click the up arrow, either by the microphone or by the video, you get into the settings, and let's see if I can bring those up. I'll get to it. Okay, you can't see that. It's only on my screen. But you get into the settings, and I've listed this here under accessibility settings. But here you have general settings, video, audio, and then you can do the virtual background, which I have the image of the mountains in Utah, because I don't want you to see the back of my living room. But there's also the very last setting is accessibility. If we had closed captioning for this meeting or any meeting, you have the option of having the normal font size or a much larger font size if you need to bring that font size up. And then there's a checkbox for the meeting controls to always keep the controls up. If you've presented, you'll know that the controls disappear when you move your mouse away from the controls. And you can also increase the size of your chat display. And that's through here. You can go to 100% and on up to 200% or more, I believe. And then next you have, this is new, that just added this month, I believe, the security settings. And I've mentioned you can lock the meeting once everybody's already in. You know, you can enable the waiting room so people can't come straight to the meeting. You have to, the host has to view their name, and if they approve of them, they can admit them into the meeting. And then here's where you can disable everyone's ability to share screen or chat or rename themselves. So some really nice security features that Zoom has had. They've had a good response to the security problems they had previously. in addressing those issues. And then here's a notice as a host that Robin and I were seeing. It says, Kevin Red has entered the waiting room for this meeting, and we can admit, or we can click on the waiting room and see everybody who's in the waiting room. And if you click Manage Participants at the bottom, you'll see who's in the waiting room. And here's another option here where we talk about muting people individually. That's what you would see on the screen. As a host, I could mute this person. And as I was doing this, I had another laptop set up beside me, so I'm good you see the same name twice for me. But I could mute this person, or I could click on More, and that would bring this list up. I can chat privately to that person, so it's not going to everyone. I could ask them to start a video if it's time for them to present. I could also make them a host or a co-host. Give them the ability to record. And here's a feature for captioning. I can assign this person to type the closed caption. So they'll get an extra window that pops up that they type the captions into. And if you turn the caption on for your meeting, you'll see those captions. And then we have, I can rename the person or put them in a waiting room or remove them from the meeting. And there's also other controls that you have as a participant. Say somebody asks a question for understanding, they could click yes or no, or if we're going too fast, you could ask them to slow down or speed up. And then as the host, somebody, they have the option to raise their hand, or one of these answers will show up beside their name. And then I can click clear all. That would clear everybody's responses. And then there's the chat. I'm sure you're probably familiar with chat. And here's the chat. You can go by default, you chat with everyone, or you could click this drop down and select someone's name to chat with privately. And then there's the screen share. And when you're screen sharing, you have the option to share your entire screen, which is this first option by default. But sometimes you might have other documents or email or something up you don't want people to see. You could select on, for example, the internet browser or a document and share only those applications. So that, like Matt did earlier, he shared only the PowerPoint instead of his entire screen. There's also the whiteboard. I learned about that yesterday with a meeting with Robin, that we could put the whiteboard up and we can all annotate and write on the board at the same time. And here's a new feature that I like using. Under the advanced option for sharing, if you click on portion of screen, you can make this small rectangle, so it's not sharing my entire screen, which would make things larger. I can increase the size of the rectangle, which may make, just probably just made all this font a lot smaller, maybe harder to see, or I can narrow this down to a small portion, and now you'll see the font should be a lot larger, probably a lot easier to read. Let me go ahead and bring that back. And then you have the option of recording the meeting if you have that privilege. As a host or a co-host, you do. You can record to the cloud, or you can record the meeting down to your computer's hard drive. Let's see, we have another chat question maybe. How do you have just your picture up when you join a meeting? That's a good question. It's going to be in your settings, and I'll try and share that here in just a moment. But I want to cover closed caption. With closed captioning, you have the option to assign it to a participant. So if you click this button, you can choose somebody who's going to be the captioner, or you can do it, or you can create this this API token that would go to a third party. Like for us in meetings, we've used Caption First, and they have their own software that they'll connect with Zoom with, because it has all the shortcuts where they can enter like maybe a letter or two and it enters a whole word, the way the captionists have a quick way of typing. What that third-party token will do is give you this long URL that looks like this with all the garbled letters and numbers. But that's a token that they'll plug into their software so that they can caption for their meeting just like they would at a conference using CART. And then there are breakout rooms. Robin, could you do me a favor? And I don't see the breakout room option. I think, wait just a moment. I think I have to be switched over to the host
Okay, so
for that to work, because I'm going to put everybody in a breakout room and we'll see how that works. Am I going too fast or are we running out of time?
You're fine. I think
okay.
I just switched you over to be host.
Okay, I'm almost done with what I have. But I thought we could have a little fun with the, oh, there's more options. There's the breakout rooms. Okay, I'm going to recreate because it does not appear to have assigned everybody on the according to the email addresses. There we are. We have everybody. Okay. So I'm going to put everybody in a breakout room. I'm going to switch to the room and give you a question for you to answer. And when you're in the room, I want you to pick one person who's going to keep track of your answers. And it's a simple question. This will be real quick. But I want you to report back. So here we go.
All right.
Wow.
We finished quickly.
You did.
We were aptly named number one, so.
There you go. And I see Kevin just sent a message saying 30 seconds and the room will be closed. That's very helpful because, having breakout rooms, we wanted to do some training in New Mexico virtually, and we were looking to see how the breakout rooms would work. So
yeah,
I've
I've
got a
been
nice.
talking about them, but it's the first time I've been in one, so it's good to see how they work.
Yeah, excellent.
That was cool.
Are we coming back to the main room?
Yeah.
In the chat.
We've got people joining. Give us just a little bit. We'll bring the rest of the people in and I'll share the answers. 14. Okay, people are coming back in. We're up to 22, 23. We had about 37. A couple people had to leave. Welcome back, everyone.
Yay.
29. We've just a few more people to come back to the main room.
Are you going to tell us how to do that background thing too, or is that in the settings?
Am I back? Are we back?
You're back.
Oh.
Welcome back.
I don't know what happened. Something happened and I ended up out of my breakout room. I'm sorry.
It automatically, once the host, and I close the breakout room.
It has a second
And if you don't,
it's got a timer.
and if you don't click on main session after a set number of time, it was 60 seconds. It automatically brings you back to the main room. So there's nothing for you to do.
Great.
Well, I didn't see the main session button. I was looking for that. And thank you, Pamela, for trying to help me get out. But it finally gave me a prompt.
Oh, good.
But I mean, I didn't see the return to main session. It's like the rest of the room just left.
Oh, really?
Stranded.
There was
Okay.
I didn't see it. It wasn't on my screen. I kept tapping and tapping. So, and I'm on an iPad. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I didn't see it. And I'm used to using Zoom, so I haven't used breakout room before though.
So I stuck in there with you until we both got out.
I appreciate that. You're looking out.
And you can change the time from 60 seconds down to 30 or 15, I believe. I think we're kind of running close to the end of time. I don't see anybody else joining us. So what do we have for dinner? What's the main course?
Well, in our room, which was number one, the carnivores were going to eat sirloin steak and Chilean sea bass. And the herbivores were going to have pizza and cookies.
Okay. What were our side dishes, room 2?
Our side dishes were jambalaya, mac and cheese, and broccoli.
That sounds good. Okay. And room 3, what about dessert?
Well, we had ice cream, peach cobbler, and pound cake.
I'm ready now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Okay, real quick, I want to do one more thing. I see the time's running short, but I'm going to put a poll out so you can see what that looks like.
Ah. Oh.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, I see responses coming in.
Oh, we put it. Oh, we choose. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Select one, and I don't remember if it said submit or not.
It did.
Yes, it does.
It did.
Okay, it does.
See a poll. Where's the poll?
You don't see it, Robin? Maybe because you're the co-host.
Oh, it does say the host and the co-host can't do the poll.
Yeah.
Oh, because
So co-host doesn't get to eat, so you're not eating.
No eating.
No eating.
Not for the host. You have to keep working.
Oh.
All right. I see 21 of 26, so 80% of the people. I'm going to go ahead and stop it for the sake of time. And ice cream is the winner with 7.
Yay!
Followed by cake, and then anything involving chocolate. Let's see if I can share the results. Do you see the results?
Oh, yes.
Yes, very good.
Okay, good. That's really, I mean, that's it. That's what I have.
Great information, Kevin. Thank you. And if you have other questions or want to follow up with Kevin, get more information, feel free to reach out to him at Currents. It's KRED@UACurrents, CURRENTS.org.
I have one question, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Is that because of a lot of people using the Zoom, that's why sometimes it's becoming difficult to log in?
The login?
Yeah.
Becoming difficult? I don't think so. I mean, there's a possibility that, you know, during this pandemic, there's a lot of people online right now that can slow the internet down, but I don't think it really should cause an issue with logging in.
I see.
Well, like when I was trying to submit the poll answer, I kept getting a message saying that there was an error and that my submission that failed to send.
Oh, okay.
But I guess the other piece, Kevin, is as we start to use these digital tools and as we experiment, we start to find out, you know, what our systems can do and can't, and be able to get that help we need to make sure we could be as effective as possible in Zoom. I think your presentation was great. I learned, I was mentioning in the breakout room that we wanted to do breakout rooms for one of our presentations in Mexico, and to be able to see how that works. And also the polling information is so great because you can get that real-time feedback of where folks are at in the training, because oftentimes if you're doing a face-to-face training, you get more of that kind of feedback loop immediately.
Right.
And it'd be nice, you know, when not everyone's video is on, to be able to reach out with a poll. So very good. It was very informative.
Yeah, and those polls, you can make them up before the meeting or you can make them up during the meeting. You can, so that one I had already made up, you know, prior to this meeting and set, but you can change them during the meeting as well.
Well, and you picked the right one with dessert, so
Thank you again, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Learning something new every day.
Very
we'll turn it
helpful.
over if we have a few more minutes. John Walsh, if you'll give us an update on sustainability plans.
Well, and I'll try to be brief. You know, first I want to acknowledge that we're in challenging times. I think we've, you know, what Matt presented and what Kevin presenting on how to really use these digital platforms, we may want to look at that as well with our sustainability planning groups. I know that many state agencies, they had to move from a face-to-face business model to moving to a virtual platform for how they provide services. And many agencies also had to deal with the fact that their unemployment insurance, the amount of unemployment insurance claims within states skyrocketed to the point where staff were being reassigned from workforce partners, from VR agencies, to deal with and address those issues. So I know in times of crisis, in times of challenge, oftentimes that diverts our attentions, and our attentions from where we wanted to do some broader systems change initiatives, they get kind of stalled. And I think one of the things we have to look at when we're in these times is we know that we have to go back and revisit. What are we doing with our sustainability plan, and what do we hope to accomplish? So I think, you know, directly related to what we heard today is, one, how do we use these digital platforms, whether Zoom or WebEx or other platforms that are available, in creative ways to pull that sustainability leadership committee back together. And even maybe we need to go in and check in with folks and say, where are you with your organization? How is it going with providing services to your consumers? What are some of the challenges you're up against? What can your E3 partners do to help you in this time of crisis? What type of additional resources can we get out to you, or training in a virtual format, or other resources that are being developed by other technical assistance centers? We know that the WinTAC just developed a bunch of COVID-19 resources and other technical assistance centers. So, you know, how do we do telecounseling and do it where we maintain privacy, how we maintain confidentiality? I've got a house full of people. My kids are here. My partner is here. And we're all telecommuting at the same time and doing school lessons. And I'm trying to have meetings with my clients as well. How do we manage all that? So what I would recommend, and again, we don't have much time, so I don't want to take too much but I think this is a great time for each of the state projects to make sure you reconnect with your E3 lead. Reach out to them, see what we can do to assist you. I also greatly encourage that we get a meeting together of the core members of your sustainability leadership team, and let's check in with folks, see where they're at, see where their needs are. And then let's re-explore of why we set up the sustainability plan the way we did and what we hope to accomplish. And how do we incrementally get back to working on that? I know we have some new priorities now, and I know we have some pressing matters that have to be addressed, and client services come first. But we know that the systems change initiatives you guys initiated were around improving service delivery. So we don't want that to lag either. So please tap into us. The other thing I wanted to share is our project officer, Felipe Lule from RSA, had shared with us that RSA is looking at having greater flexibility in no-cost extensions for projects. So as everyone knows, Targeted Communities ends, our funding ends September 30th of this year. So, but we have been told that RSA is going to be much more flexible in granting no-cost extensions to projects. So hopefully we can also work with you beyond October 1st and continue to partner with you in really implementing these systems change initiatives. So that's kind of the core of what I wanted to talk about today, Robin. And I thank everyone for giving me this little extra time beyond our meeting time.
Absolutely. We appreciate everyone hanging in there with us today. And John, thank you for sharing that information. Great advice about regrouping, kind of leads full circle back to Matthew's presentation about pivoting and shifting. And certainly that's the case with our sustainability plans as well. Any other final thoughts or questions before we move on to adjourning? Our next meeting will be May 21st. Same time, 1 p.m. Comments, questions before we dismiss?
Great meeting. Thank you.
Yes.
Great, wonderful information. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Kevin. It's been a great meeting. Thank you to all our first-time participants. It's good to have you on today. We enjoy the participation and the opportunity to learn more about the innovative work in Oregon and also how to make full use of this virtual platform. There's much more that's available to us. So we appreciate everyone for being in today.
Zoom is where it's at, Robin.
It is where it's at right now. That is no joke. We're going to share a link to the recording on the Project E3 website. If you haven't registered there, you can go on there and register to be a part of the Leadership Academy if you're not getting the emails. But otherwise, if you've already sent me a request, I'll go ahead and send those follow-up handouts today to you directly. Everyone be safe, stay indoors.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Great meeting.
Bye.
Take care.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.